Raven Locke, a former mercenary with a past of killing his father to protect his sister, is imprisoned in a New York federal penitentiary. A mysterious CIA chief, Draven Grimshaw, recruits him into the Shadow program, turning him into an anonymous agent to fight against underworld forces. Raven accepts in exchange for his freedom and the chance to protect his sister, Ilara, but quickly discovers Draven is hiding a plot to smuggle bioweapons to a Mexican cartel. At the end of the chapter, Raven receives his first mission in Chicago, where he nearly kills an innocent target. Sparking his suspicion, blood stained the rotting wooden floor of the suburban New York house, the boom of a shotgun echoing like a final curse. Raven Locke was just 18, his trembling hands gripping the old firearm. The smell of gunpowder mixing with the foul breath of his father, the drunken man who had beaten him and his mother throughout their hellish years. That night, the man had burst into his sister Ilara's room, a leather belt whipping repeatedly against the small 8-year-old's body, her shrill cries tearing through the darkness. Raven didn't hesitate. A single shot to the chest ended the nightmare, but instead of freedom, he received a life sentence. Trapped within the grey concrete walls of Rikers Island federal prison, now, 8 years later, Raven sat huddled in a dark cell, his deep blue eyes staring coldly into the endless void. Muscles coiled beneath his tattered prison uniform. His life seemed to have ended here, amidst the echoing screams from other cells and the relentless, haunting smell of sweat and filth. Suddenly, the screech of a metal lock shattered the heavy silence. A middle-aged man walked in, a sharp black suit hugging his gaunt frame, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed, his brown eyes as sharp as a blade. This was Draven Grimshaw, founder of the CIA's Shadow program, a secret project that recruited blood-stained souls from the hell of prison, forging them into invisible phantoms to serve the nation, not from prestigious military academies, but from those who had already tasted death. Raven Locke, Draven said, his voice deep yet full of authority, his eyes scanning Raven's muscular body as if assessing a weapon. I know all about you. Killed your father to save your sister. No regrets. Right, but do you want to truly live, not just survive like a caged beast? Raven slowly lifted his head, his muscles tensing under the drab grey cloth, the dragon tattoos snaking up his arms, glinting in the weak fluorescent light. He said nothing, just stared, waiting. Draven sat down on the metal chair opposite him, the screech of metal echoing in the cramped space. The Shadow program chooses men like you, killers who don't blink, but still have a shred of conscience deep down. We'll wipe your past clean. Train you to be the perfect agent. Hand-to-hand combat. Long-range sniping. System hacking. Survival in an urban hellscape. In return, you serve the CIA in the shadows, where the law can't reach. Freedom. Raven, and the chance to protect Ilara, the girl now lives with her aunt in the Boston suburbs. But this world is full of monsters. Raven was silent for a long moment, his breathing steady. The memory of Ilara, her wide, terrified eyes that night flashing in his mind. In prison, he was just waiting to die slowly, worn down each day by cell block brawls and a gnawing loneliness. On the outside, at least he'd have a chance to get revenge on the world that put him here. He nodded, his voice hoarse. Do it. From that moment, Raven Locke was dead, and Shadow 9, a nameless ghost, was born. 6 months passed in a nightmare of training at secret bases scattered from the Rocky Mountains to the Florida coast. Raven learned to snap an enemy's neck with jiu-jitsu in a split second, hit a target from half a mile away through the scope of an M24 rifle, hack security locks with an encrypted laptop, and survive simulated torture sessions in freezing water. Draven Grimshaw became his mentor, even a father figure. assigning him the task of protecting Alara from afar through periodic reports. But Draven was nearing retirement, and power was falling into the hands of a more ambitious force, shadowy figures within the CIA that Raven had only heard whispers about. Today, Draven summoned Raven to an underground headquarters beneath Washington, D.C. The air was cold, with neon lights flickering across global monitoring screens and the smell of metal and burnt coffee hanging in the air. New mission. 9. Draven said, his eyes glinting behind silver-rimmed glasses. His voice urgent. Eliminate a data trafficker in Chicago. He's threatening national security with information about the Shadow program. Clean kill. No trace. Raven received the order on an encrypted device. No questions asked. His partner was Sable Noir, a sharp female agent with short, neatly tied black hair. Her slender figure clad in a tight black tactical suit, carrying a sophisticated, disguised weapons case. They met at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. Amidst the bustling crowds and the smell of exhaust mixed with the salty wind off Lake Michigan, Sable glanced at Raven, her voice confident but sharp. Ready. 9? The target is downtown, at the Hilton Hotel. They moved quickly through the crowded streets, the chilly autumn wind whipping against their faces, the sound of car horns blaring. Raven assembled his sniper rifle on a high-rise rooftop, aiming his scope at the chaotic traffic on the glistening asphalt below. The target appeared a middle-aged Asian man, surrounded by burly bodyguards in grey suits. Draven's voice came through the earpiece. Take the shot. But then, a child suddenly ran near the target, laughing and playing with a bright red rubber ball, her blonde hair flying in the wind. Raven hesitated, his finger tightening on the trigger. Shadow protocol. Minimize civilian casualties. He couldn't shoot, the bullet could pass through and kill the innocent child. Can't do it. Raven whispered into his comms, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold wind. Draven yelled back, do it now. 9. That's an order. Raven lowered his rifle and acted on his own. He remotely triggered the building's fire alarm system, sending sirens wailing across Chicago and causing the crowd to scatter in panic on the cobblestone sidewalk. The power grid went dark, swallowing the streets in blackness as the target hastily retreated into a narrow alley. Raven leaped from the rooftop, rappelling down the building, his body hitting the hard pavement with a jarring impact that sent a jolt of pain through his spine. A Muay Thai roundhouse kick took down the first bodyguard, and he snapped the second one's neck with a jiu-jitsu twist, a sickening crack of bone echoing amidst the screams. The third man fired a pistol, but Raven dodged the bullet like a phantom, plunging a combat knife through his chest, hot blood spraying across his black jacket. Sable joined in from a distance, firing with precision from a window across the street, the two of them coordinating perfectly like two blades of the same knife. The target fled into a dark alley. Raven pursued, leaping from a rooftop onto the cracked concrete below. The two men faced off under the dim yellow streetlights. The target lunged, blocking the first blow with a karate chop. Raven recognized him instantly. It was Shadow 4, his old comrade, Jax Harlan, his familiar face now twisted by betrayal. They fought fiercely in the narrow alley. A boxing hook from Jax caught Raven's shoulder, making him stagger. But he countered with a high taekwondo kick to the chest, slamming Jax against the red brick wall, grappling on the filthy ground. Raven drew his knife and drove it deep into Jax's abdomen. Before he died, Jax whispered, blood frothing at the corner of his mouth, Draven is the traitor. The secret on this data core: bioweapons. For the Mexican cartel, kill him, or you're dead. Jax handed him a necklace containing a tiny data core. Then his eyes rolled back, and his body went limp. Raven left the scene, his heart hammering like a war drum. his hands covered in blood. Draven sent a team to search the body, but they found nothing. Draven's voice buzzed in his ear, "Bring the core back immediately." Raven pretended to agree, but suspicion churned like acid in his gut. He opened the core's files in a dingy internet cafe, the laptop screen flashing with dense encryption, transfer of bioweapons, a genetically modified virus from the CIA to a Mexican cartel, orchestrated by Draven. "What the hell is Draven smuggling?" Raven muttered, picturing the man's deceitful face. Sable called, "Rendezvous immediately." Draven's orders. Raven refused, tucked the core into the necklace, and ditched his phone to avoid being tracked. He contacted an old backup channel, his mind filled with doubt. The hunt had begun, but was Ilara safe? And was Draven his mentor? Or his enemy? Which area are you listening to this story from? And what time is it where you are right now? Leave a comment below so I know you are still healthy and fully focused on this story. My dear friend, we will continue right after this. After the botched assassination in Chicago, Raven escapes Draven's kill squad, heading for the Mexican border to investigate the stolen data core. He finds an unexpected ally, the agent Sable Noir, who reveals that Draven is using the cartel to manipulate American politics. They fight cartel assassins hand-to-hand in the scorching desert. But Sable is gravely injured, forcing Raven to decide whether to trust her or leave her behind. God's word echoes through Sable's words. The light will guide those who seek justice. As the Bible teaches, the Mexican desert wind howled through the window, cracks of the old pickup truck, carrying reddish gold sand that coated the cracked windshield. Raven Locke, now just Shadow 9 in his chaotic mind, gripped the steering wheel, his eyes constantly scanning the rearview mirror. Behind him, the sleek black SUVs of Draven's hunters sped down the cracked asphalt highway leading south from Chicago, their headlights cutting through the darkness like the Grim Reaper's scythe. The data core hidden in the necklace felt heavy against his chest, containing a secret that could bring down the entire CIA. Bioweapons, a genetically modified virus being sold by Draven to a Mexican cartel in exchange for the power to manipulate you. Elections. He had ditched his phone, cut off all contact. But Jax Harlan's whispers still echoed in his head. "Kill him, or you're dead." Raven gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead, even though the air was as dry as a furnace. Ilara, his sister, now 16, living peacefully in Boston, was she safe? Or was Draven already using her as bait? The truck rattled as it sped across the Tijuana border. The wail of Border Patrol sirens fading behind them. Raven had used fake papers from the Shadow program to get through, but he knew Draven had eyes everywhere, from surveillance satellites to local spies. He stopped the truck in a small town on the edge of the Sonoran Desert, where lone, terracotta-colored adobe houses stood under a silver moon. The smell of burning wood mingling with the salty, dusty wind from the Sea of Cortez. An underground bar, its red neon light flickering the words Cantina del Diablo, was the backup rendezvous point from his training days. Inside, the air was thick with the scratchy sounds of mariachi music and the smell of cheap tequila. As red-eyed Mexican cowboys eyed him with suspicion, Raven sat in a dark corner, ordered a mezcal, and tapped his fingers rhythmically on the rough wooden counter. Waiting, the cantina door burst open, and a gust of desert wind swirled in with sand and dust. A woman entered, her short black hair tied back neatly, her slender frame clad in a worn brown leather jacket, her sharp green eyes scanning the crowd like radar. Sable Noir, Shadow 5. His former teammate from missions in the Middle East. She sat down next to Raven, her voice a whisper over the music. 9. You're a hard man to kill. Draven is losing his mind back in Washington. He knows you have the data core. Raven gripped his mezcal glass, not turning his head. Why are you here? On his orders. Sable gave a bitter smile. revealing a faint scar on her left cheek from an explosion in Baghdad. No. I saw you hesitate in Chicago. That little girl. She reminded me of my sister, who died from a cartel's experimental virus. Draven uses them to manipulate American politics, selling the virus to the kingpin Kale Vossar in exchange for votes from the border states. Raven looked at her, his heart beating faster. Sable was one of the few people in Shadow he trusted. She had once saved him from a trap in Afghanistan with a single, perfect sniper shot. But now, in the middle of the Mexican desert, trust was a luxury. Prove it, he said, sliding the data core across the counter. Sable plugged it into her encrypted phone. The screen flickering. Transfer manifests are weaponized. Airborne strain of Ebola. Moved from a CIA warehouse to Kale Vossar's stronghold in Mexico City. He's turned the CIA into his personal tool. Sable whispered, her eyes flashing with anger. I've been tracking you from Los Angeles. Ilara is safe for now, but Draven will use her to lure you out. Raven nodded, fear coiling inside him like a sharp knife. He had killed his own father to protect Ilara. Was he now doomed to repeat this bloody cycle? Suddenly, the cantina door shattered from a volley of silenced gunshots. 3 cartel assassins burst in burly figures in blood-stained white shirts, pistols raised, their eyes bloodshot under black sombreros. They were Kale Vossar's men, hired by Draven to hunt for the core. The first one rushed Raven, slashing at his throat with a crescent-bladed dagger in a karate chop. He dodged to the side, the desert wind whistling past his ear, and used jujitsu to lock the man in a chokehold from behind, snapping his neck with a dry, cracking sound. The body fell to the beer-stained wooden floor, dark red blood spreading like an ink stain. Sable rolled behind the bar, pulled a mini assault rifle from under her jacket, and fired 2 precise shots pierced the second man's chest. He collapsed onto a pool table, the balls scattering with a series of sharp clicks. The third man opened fire with a submachine gun, bullets tearing through the terracotta adobe walls, sending up clouds of plaster dust. Patrons screamed and scattered, tequila glasses shattering underfoot. Raven vaulted over the counter, delivering a low Muay Thai kick to the man's knee. Hearing the bone snap like a dry twig, he lunged forward, grappling in close combat on the floor, slick with blood and beer. A boxing hook from the assassin slammed into Raven's shoulder, sending a jolt of pain through him. But he countered with a high taekwondo kick to the jaw, sending teeth flying with a spray of red saliva. "Who are you?" Raven roared, trapping him in an armbar against the wall. The man let out a rattling laugh. "Kyle sends his regards. The data core. Or death." Sable rushed in to help, using Aikido to throw him to the ground and driving her knife through his thigh. Hot blood sprayed out, staining her dress red. They fled into the desert, the hot night wind whipping their faces like a leather lash, yellow sand crunching under the tires of the stolen SUV. But Sable was clutching her stomach, blood seeping through her clothes from a grazing bullet wound she'd taken back at the bar. "I'm fine," she gasped, her face pale in the moonlight. Raven stopped the car beside a large boulder, the endless desert stretching out before them, dotted with thorny cacti glistening with night dew. He tore his shirt to bandage her wound, his hands trembling slightly for the first time in years. He felt that being alone wasn't a choice. "Why are you helping me? Draven will kill us both." Sable gripped his hand, her green eyes flickering with a fragile hope. "For justice." 9. The Bible says light will guide those who seek justice. I believe you. Still have a conscience. Raven fell silent, the memory of Ilara flooding back. She had once asked him, "Brother, does God forgive killers?" Now, in the middle of this deadly desert, he had to choose. abandon Sable and run alone. Or trust her and face the cartel as they closed in? The cartel assassins' vehicles appeared on the horizon, kicking up dust like a golden storm. Raven started the engine. His heart pounding, the hunt was on. All the way to Mexico City, where Kael Vossar was waiting. But Sable's wound was bleeding. And trust, the most fragile thing of all, was it enough to survive? Raven brought Sable to an underground hospital in Mexico City, where he hacked the data core and discovered Draven was selling CIA secrets to cartel boss Kael Vossar. Draven sent a special forces team to assault the hospital, leading to a chaotic firefight and close-quarters combat in the blood-soaked hallways. Raven managed to save Ilara via an emergency call, but Draven kidnapped the girl to use as bait, forcing Raven into a bloody chase across the border back to Los Angeles. The sands of the Sonoran Desert billowed behind the SUV, a golden storm swallowing the pursuing cartel vehicles. Raven Lock floored the accelerator. The engines roar, drowning out the wind whistling through the cracked windshield, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. In the passenger seat, Sable Noir clutched her stomach, blood soaking the makeshift bandage, her face pale under the shimmering desert moon. "Keep going," she rasped, her voice breaking with every jolt of the vehicle. Raven glanced over, his heart tightening. The wound from the cantina wasn't just a flesh wound. It was a reminder of the fragile trust he had just placed in her. Behind them, 3 cartel trucks sped closer, their glaring headlights cutting through the darkness. Machine gun fire, tearing up the tires of cars on the roadside. Kicking up sprays of dirt, he wrenched the wheel, swerving onto a bumpy side road. Gravel peppering the windshield like shrapnel. A bullet hit the rear of the vehicle with a screech of metal. But Raven didn't stop. Mexico City, a sprawling metropolis of 1,000,000 neon lights, was their only destination. The location of a shadow program underground hospital where he could save Sable and hack the data core. They tore into the outskirts of Mexico City at dawn. As the blazing red sun rose over the Sierra Madre mountains, casting a crimson glow on the ramshackle slums and narrow cobblestone streets. The smell of exhaust fumes mingled with the spicy aroma of street food, crispy fried tacos and jalapeno peppers hanging in the humid air. Raven zigzagged through a bustling street market, dodging crowds of vendors, their shouted calls echoing amidst the blare of car horns. The underground hospital was located beneath an abandoned warehouse in the Colonia Doctores district, its entrance hidden behind a pile of rotting wooden crates. He carried Sable inside, her body feeling as light as a feather, her blood dripping onto the cracked concrete floor. An underground doctor, a scarred old Mexican man named Raul, a former army medic, rushed over, his voice hoarse. "Put her here. The bullet's deep. But I can save her." Raven nodded, his eyes scanning the dark hallway that reeked of antiseptic and rust. Then sat down at an old computer in the corner and plugged in the data core. The laptop screen flickered, dense lines of code slowly decrypting under Raven's flying fingers. The data materialized like a curse. Draven Grimshaw wasn't just selling a bioweapon, a weaponized, airborne strain of Ebola to Kael Vossar, the notorious Mexico City cartel boss, but was also using it to manipulate American politics. He was trading CIA secrets for bribes from border state congressmen, turning a pandemic into a tool to control elections. "Draven, you monster," Raven muttered, his fist clenched so tight it ached. He remembered his training days in Florida, when Draven had told him, "Shadow exists for justice." 9. Don't let the darkness consume your soul. Now, he knew it was all a lie. The burner phone vibrated a call from Ilara. Her voice trembled through sobs. "Raven. They took Auntie. They said, if you don't hand over the core, I'm next." A knife twisted in Raven's gut as an image of Ilara, her messy brown hair, her blue eyes that were so much like his, flashed in his mind. "Draven has her," he whispered, the blood rushing to his head. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the warehouse, and plaster dust rained down from the ceiling like grey snow. Draven's Spec Ops team, 6 figures in black tactical gear and dust-covered gas masks. M4 rifles at the ready, stormed in through the main entrance, their flashlights cutting through the hallway like scythes. These weren't cartel thugs, they were Shadow Team, the ghosts Raven had once trained with. The first man rushed him, slashing horizontally with a rifle-mounted bayonet in a karate strike. Raven dodged, the wind from the blade whispering past his ear, and used jujitsu to lock him in a chokehold from behind, snapping his neck with a crack that echoed amidst the screams. The body crumpled to the blood-spattered concrete, the rifle clattering beside it. Raoul yelled from the operating room, "Sable's in surgery, get out of here!" But Raven wasn't running. He drew the Glock from his waistband and fired 2 rounds into the second man's chest. The bullets punched through his body armor, and blood sprayed out under the flickering fluorescent lights. The hallway turned into a hellscape. Machine gun fire ripped through the red brick walls, sending debris flying like shattered glass. Raven rolled behind a metal crate, dodging a hail of bullets, then sprang up and delivered a low Muay Thai kick to the third operative's knee. The bone shattered with a sickening crack, and the man collapsed. Screaming, Raven closed in for close-quarters combat, grappling on the floor, slick with blood. A boxing hook from the assassin caught Raven in the shoulder, pain flaring like fire. But he countered with a high taekwondo kick to the jaw, sending teeth flying in a spray of red spit. "You betrayed Draven," the man roared, pulling a dagger and slashing at his stomach. Raven dodged just in time, the blade tearing through his shirt and searing his skin. Drawing a warm trickle of blood, he used Aikido to slam the man to the ground, locking him in an armbar until his eyes rolled back in their sockets. The fourth man opened fire from a blind corner. Bullets tore through a metal barrel, and shrapnel dug into Raven's arm. Hot blood dripping down, he gritted his teeth and launched himself forward like a phantom, unleashing a flurry of kung fu strikes on the man's face, a sickening crack as his nose broke, blood spattering across the grimy wall. Sable, her stitches fresh, stumbled out of the room, mini rifle at the ready. She sniped the fifth man with a clean shot through the head, the body slumping against a steel door with a screech. But the last one, the team's commander, a mountain of a man named Vance, a former Shadow 2, rushed Raven with a barrage of boxing blows. A powerful hook slammed into his chest, sending him staggering back, gasping for air. "Give me the core." 9. Draven will spare Elara, Vance snarled. Pressing a knife to his throat, Raven blocked the blade with his forearm, blood pouring freely, then shattered his jaw with a Muay Thai elbow strike, sending broken teeth scattering. They grappled in the blood-soaked hallway, the floor slick beneath their feet, their ragged breaths mixing with the acrid smell of gunpowder. Sable jumped in to help, bringing a karate chop down on Vance's wrist. The knife clattered to the floor, and she locked him in an armbar from behind. Vance struggled, but Raven finished it with a final punch to the temple. He crumpled, unconscious in a pool of blood. They ran for the car, Sable driving while Raven checked his phone. A message from Draven: "Bring the core to Los Angeles, or Elara dies at sunset." Raven's heart sank, the memory of his father's murder flooding back blood on the wooden floor. Elara's screams. He turned to Sable, his voice raw. "She's all I have, but Draven, he's going to pay." Sable nodded, her eyes flashing with determination despite the searing pain from her wound. "Justice is coming, Raven. As the Lord teaches, they who sow the wind shall reap the whirlwind." The car tore across the border, heading for Los Angeles under the blistering desert sun. The bloody hunt had begun, but would Ilara live to see the dawn? Back in Los Angeles, Raven infiltrated a local cartel safe house to rescue Ilara, facing brutal knife fights in a dark garage. He discovered that Kyle Vossar, Draven's cousin, was the true mastermind. Driven by a personal vendetta from his military past, Sable joined him, providing sniper support. But an explosion nearly killed them all, revealing a much larger network. Raven contemplated, is justice killing them all? Or is it forgiveness? As the Lord teaches? The bright neon lights of Los Angeles glittered through the cracked windshield as the SUV sped down Interstate 10. The sunset burning as red as blood. Raven Locke gripped the steering wheel. His muscles coiled tight beneath a worn leather jacket. Blood from the wound he'd gotten in Mexico City still seeping, staining the seat red. Beside him, Sable Noir checked her mini-rifle. Her face was pale, but her green eyes flashed with steely resolve. The incision on her abdomen had been crudely stitched up by Raoul with coarse thread. Behind them, Ilara, his sister, now held hostage by Draven as bait, was just a figure in a video message. The 16-year-old girl was huddled in a dark shipping container. Her blue eyes, so much like Raven's, wide with fear. Her voice trembled. Brother, save me. Raven's heart felt like it was being crushed. The memory of his father's murder flooding back, blood staining the wood floors in New York. Little Ilara's piercing screams. Now, Draven was using that same fear to tighten his grip. Cartel safe house in East LA. Sable said, her voice hoarse with pain. An abandoned garage near Boyle Heights. Kyle Vossar is holding Ilara there. Waiting for the data core. Raven nodded. Saying nothing, the promise he'd made to himself echoed in his mind. He wouldn't lose her again. They parked in a dark alley on the edge of a vibrant Latino neighborhood, where the sounds of salsa music spilled from neon-lit bars and the smell of fried tacos mixed with thick diesel fumes in the humid summer air. The old garage sat behind a chain-link fence. Rusted trucks piled up under the dim moonlight. The shadows swallowing shipping containers holding the biovirus. Raven cut the fence with specialized pliers, his movements as silent as a ghost's. Then slipped in through a back door, the smell of old engine. 4 cartel soldiers patrolled, their muscular bodies clad in sweat-stained white t-shirts, handguns dangling at their hips. The first one turned his back, and Raven lunged from the shadows, wrapping him in a jiu-jitsu chokehold from behind. Snapping his neck in an instant, the body slumped to the floor without a sound. The second man heard a faint noise, whipped around, and drew a curved blade dagger. The steel flashed under the red neon lights. Raven dodged to the side, the wind from the blade grazing his cheek. Then countered with Muay Thai. An elbow strike shattered the man's jaw, sending teeth and dark red blood flying as he collapsed, writhing. But the sound had given him away. The third man opened fire with his handgun, bullets whizzing past Raven's ear, tearing through the red brick wall. He rolled behind a truck, pulled a dagger from his calf sheath, and charged in for close combat. Steel clashed against steel, the clang echoing through the garage as sparks lit up the darkness. The cartel soldier slashed at his abdomen, but Raven blocked with his forearm, blood streaming from the gash, then used a high taekwondo kick to his chest, sending the man slamming into the metal wall with a heavy thud and the sickening crack of breaking ribs. The last man charged in from the cellar door. Throwing a barrage of boxing punches, a powerful hook landed on Raven's shoulder, a searing pain spreading like fire through an old wound. He staggered, but tightened his grip on the knife, grappling on the garage floor slick with engine oil. "You die for Kale," the man roared, stabbing his knife through Raven's shoulder, hot blood spraying out and staining his shirt red. Raven roared in pain, used Aikido to throw him to the ground, and locked him in an armbar. A dry crack of bone echoed, as the man's eyes rolled back in his head. He limped down into the cellar, his breathing ragged, and found Ilara tied to a steel chair, her face pale under the dangling light bulb. A tape recorder repeating Draven's threats. "You," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Raven cut the ropes and held her tight, the smell of Ilara's fearful sweat filling his nostrils. "It's okay, kiddo. I'm here." But Sable suddenly appeared from a side entrance, rifle at the ready. "They're coming! Kyle Vossar is upstairs." She had been lying in ambush outside, taking out 2 guards with her sniper rifle from a distance. The small pop of the headshots, followed by bodies falling from the garage roof. They ran upstairs, Ilara clinging to Raven's back. But Kyle Vossar was waiting in the middle of the dark warehouse, his massive frame dressed in a blood-stained white suit, his face a web of scars from his time in the Afghanistan military, where he had served as a mercenary under Draven. 9. Or is it Ravenlock? Kale sneered, his voice thick with a Mexican accent, a backup data core in his hand. "My cousin Draven told me everything. He sold the virus to get revenge on America, because they abandoned me in Kabul. Now, you're the key." Raven pushed Ilara behind a crate and charged. "Draven's your family? He used Ilara as bait." Kale drew a pistol and fired the bullet, zipped past Raven's ear as he dodged by rolling behind a wooden pallet. The fight exploded. Sable fired from a hidden corner, taking down a bodyguard with a shot to the chest, blood splattering against a colorful graffiti wall. Kyle engaged Raven in close combat. Swinging a large knife, the blade glinted under the neon as Raven blocked with his dagger, sparks flying with a sharp clang. They struggled amidst the warehouse, the virus container rolling under their feet, the acrid smell of chemicals filling the air. Kale used a karate chop, adding another gash to Raven's skin, dark red blood dripping onto the concrete floor. But he countered with kung fu, a flurry of punches to Kale's face, breaking his nose with a crack, sending blood spraying. "Draven promised me power," Kale bellowed, catching Raven in an armbar and pressing him against the cold metal wall. Raven struggled, using his legs to reverse the hold and flip the situation. The sound of Kale's arm breaking echoed as he screamed in pain. Sable rushed in to help, using a karate kick to send a remaining bodyguard's gun flying. But suddenly an explosion rocked the garage, flames erupting from the activated virus container, black smoke billowing and swallowing the space. The shockwave threw Raven against a wall, agonizing pain shooting through his body as glass shards embedded themselves in his back, drawing blood. Ilara screamed from a dark corner, and Sable pulled her out, coughing violently in the toxic smoke. Kale escaped through a back door, leaving behind a shattered laptop that revealed a larger network, not just the Mexican cartel, but the Russian mafia and a U. It's a senator were behind Draven, using the virus for global control. Raven staggered to his feet and held Ilara, his eyes stinging from the smoke. "We're out." For now, but a question tormented him. Did justice mean killing all these monsters? Or forgiving, as the Bible teaches, love your enemy? Now, with the vast network exposed, Los Angeles was just the beginning of a deeper hell. The group flew to Moscow, following the lead from the data core, where the cartel was collaborating with the Russian mafia to produce bioweapons. Raven and Sable laid in ambush in the freezing snow, fighting hand-to-hand with burly Russian bodyguards on the bank of a frozen river. They decrypted more data, revealing Draven was about to ship the goods to Washington. But they were betrayed by a fake contact, leading to a bloody snowmobile chase through the Tiger Forest. The black smoke from the Los Angeles garage explosion still haunted Ravenlock's senses as the private jet tore across the Atlantic, its roaring engines drowning out the wind whistling past the frosted windows. Below, grim grey clouds shrouded Europe like a curse. But inside the cramped cabin, the air was even heavier, the smell of gunpowder mixed with dried blood from Sable Noir's wounds. Elara sat huddled in the back seat, clutching a worn-out teddy bear, her deep blue eyes full of fear, staring out into the endless void. Raven clenched the backup data core recovered from Kale Vossar, his fingers flying across an encrypted laptop. The clue from the explosion was clear. The Mexican cartel wasn't acting alone, but was collaborating with the Russian mafia in Moscow to mass-produce the biological virus, turning it into a global weapon. Draven's about to ship the goods to Washington via the Siberian Railway. Sable whispered, her voice hoarse from the pain in her abdomen, her face pale under the cabin's dim yellow light. They're meeting at an old factory on the Moskva River. If we don't stop them, a pandemic will break out. Raven nodded, his heart heavy. Elara was safe for now, with fake papers. But Draven was still hunting them. And the question from that night in the garage tormented him: kill them all, or find a way to forgive. He glanced at his sister and whispered, "Go to sleep. Kiddo, I'll protect you. Just like I promised God." The plane made a secret landing at a secondary airport on the outskirts of Moscow at midnight. A light snow fell like white feathers, covering the frozen runway, as the biting Nordic wind whipped their faces like a leather strap. The Russian air was thick with the smell of vodka and coal smoke from distant chimneys. The ancient city, with its Kremlin towers shimmering under a silver moon, had now become a death trap. They rented an old SUV from a local smuggler, a bearded Russian named Ivan, whose eyes flashed with greed as he took the cash. "Kale Vossar sends his regards." Ivan smirked, tossing them the keys. Raven clenched his fists, but Sable shook her head. Later. To the factory now. The vehicle tore through the snow-covered streets, the sound of its tires grinding on the ice, mingling with the distant chime of church bells. Elara had fallen asleep in the back seat, her steady breaths like a fragile prayer. The old factory by the Moskva River appeared under the dim yellow streetlights. A grim block of grey concrete with a rusted smokestack reaching for the pitch-black sky. The heavy snowfall obscured the barbed wire fence. The acrid smell of chemicals mixed with the frozen river, and the low hum of machinery from within was like a demonic whisper. Raven and Sable took up positions on the frozen riverbank, their bodies shivering in the -5°C wind that seeped through their thick winter coats, the snow dusting Sable's black hair white. They left Elara hidden in the car half a mile away with a handgun and one order: if anything happens, run. Raven assembled his sniper rifle, aiming through the scope at the factory entrance, where hulking Russian figures, mafia bodyguards in bearskin coats with AKs slung over their shoulders, patrolled through the falling snow. Kyle's inside, meeting the mafia boss, Ivanovich. Sable whispered, her breath forming white clouds. "The virus is produced here. The data core will reveal the shipment schedule." They slipped in through a side door, the snow crunching under their boots. The factory corridor was pitch black, with neon lights flickering a sickly green, and the smell of chlorine and rusted metal hit their noses like a warning. Raven led the way, using jujitsu to take down the first guard, a chokehold from the shadows. The crack of bone lost in the sound of the wind and snow. The body fell, staining the snow a deep red that quickly began to freeze. Sable followed, her dagger ready, but was caught by surprise. A massive Russian guard spotted them and charged, unleashing a relentless barrage of punches. A powerful hook, like a sledgehammer, slammed into Sable's shoulder. She staggered on the slick, icy floor, blood from her old wound seeping out and staining the snow red. Raven lunged in, delivering a low Muay Thai kick to the man's knee. The crack of bone echoed down the hall as the man crumpled. Growling in Russian, they grappled on the frozen riverbank just outside the window. Snow swirled around them as Raven threw a high taekwondo kick to the Russian's chest. pushing him back toward the river's edge. But he countered with a horizontal slash from a bayonet, grazing Raven's arm. The blood instantly froze into a red crust. Sable got back up, using Aikido to throw him from behind and locking him in an armbar. His ragged breaths mixed with the whistling wind as he struggled, smashing his elbow into her face. A drop of blood from her split lip fell onto the white snow. Raven finished it with a kung fu strike to the temple. The man collapsed, his head hitting the river ice and creating a white fissure. They ran to the control room, where computer screens flickered with data, the shipment schedule for the virus to Washington via the Siberian Railway. Under Draven's orders. Draven's about to activate it, hundreds of containers. Sable typed, her eyes flashing with anger. But then her phone buzzed. A fake communication from Ivan. All clear. Come to Warehouse 3. Raven was suspicious, but they went right into a waiting trap. Warehouse 3 was a snowy hell. 10 Russian mobsters burst from the shadows, their AKs unleashing a hailstorm of bullets that shrieked as they tore through metal containers. Raven shoved Sable behind a pallet and returned fire with his handgun. 2 shots to the first guy's chest sent a spray of dark red blood onto the white snow. The second one charged him unarmed, engaging him in a sambo grapple. He locked Raven in an armbar, forcing him onto the freezing floor, his hot breath on Raven's face. Raven struggled, using jujitsu to reverse the hold, snapping the man's arm with a sharp crack before stabbing a knife into his thigh, the blood pooling black as it froze. Sable provided cover fire, taking down 3 men with her rifle. But a massive goon charged her, landing a hook that split her lip. She fell back into the snow, her knife clattering away. Raven rushed to help, blocking the next blow with a karate chop, then delivered a Muay Thai elbow strike that shattered the man's jaw, sending teeth flying into the snow. They sprinted for the car. But Ivan had betrayed them. Mafia SUVs were chasing them through the pitch-black taiga forest, snow swirling in the blinding glare of the headlights. Raven's car sped down the icy road, tires sliding sideways as AK rounds ripped through the windshield, spraying glass shards into his shoulder. He swerved suddenly, ramming the first vehicle. The thunderous crunch of metal echoed as the Mafia SUV flipped and exploded in a ball of red fire amidst the snow-covered pines. The second SUV stayed on their tail, firing a machine gun. Raven weaved back and forth, using his handgun to blow out its tires. The vehicle skidded and plunged into a deep taiga ravine. The Russian screams swallowed by the wind. They had escaped. For now, he stopped the car at the edge of the forest, the heavy snow already covering their tracks. Ilara called from the hidden car. "Brother, I heard explosions." Raven held the little girl, his voice trembling. "It's okay." But Sable coughed up blood and whispered, "Ivan works for Draven. The shipment is on its way. We have to get to Siberia." Raven looked out at the endless taiga, the wind cutting his skin. Was this betrayal a sign of a much greater darkness? And what did God teach about enemies from one's own side? Do not take revenge, but leave room for God's wrath? The bloody chase through the Russian snow was just the beginning, with Washington waiting like the final circle of hell. From Moscow, they followed the trail to an ancient castle in Provence, and France, a secondary weapons depot for Kael Vossar. Raven infiltrated it alone, using his climbing and close combat skills to neutralize guards in the dark. Damp stone corridors. He rescued a prisoner, a former agent tortured by Draven, only to see a video threatening Ilara, awakening his deepest fears. The prisoner's advice: God teaches us to forgive our enemies, but not to forget to protect the weak. The Moscow snow still clung to Ravenlock's boots as the private jet tore through the grey European sky, its engines roaring like a whisper of the north wind. Below, the fields of France stretched out under the pale yellow afternoon sun. But inside the cramped cabin, the air was as heavy as a tombstone. The smell of Russian cigarette smoke mingled with the antiseptic from Sable Noir's bandages. She sat in silence, checking her rifle, her face pale in the light filtering through the hazy window. Ilara was asleep in the back, her steady breathing punctuated by soft, dreamlike murmurs. A worn-out teddy bear clutched tightly in her thin arms. Raven's fingers flew across his laptop. The data from the Moscow factory flickering on the screen, an ancient castle in Provence, France, a secondary depot for Kale Vossa, where he was storing containers of the biological virus before shipping them to Washington via the Mediterranean Sea. They're meeting the Spanish mafia there, Sable whispered, her voice hoarse from the pain in her shoulder after the chase through the taiga. If we don't destroy it, Draven will activate it millions of lives. Raven nodded, his eyes fixed on the white clouds outside. Ivan's betrayal in Russia still stung, like a knife in the back. He wondered if, in this bloody cycle, there was any room for God's words, forgive 70 times 7, or if there was only vengeance. The plane landed at a small airport outside Marseille at dusk. The Provence sun stained the deep purple lavender hills red, and the Mediterranean wind carried the faint scent of salt and lavender. They rented an SUV from a local farmer, an old Frenchman named Pierre, with a deeply wrinkled face, his eyes flashing with curiosity as he took the crumpled euros. Montfort Castle? A demonic place, Pierre said, shaking his head as he tossed them the keys. The vehicle sped along winding cliffside roads, the sound of its tires on the gravel echoing with the distant roar of the waves. Ilara woke up, her eyes wide with anxiety. Brother, is the castle really haunted? Raven stroked his sister's hair, his voice uncharacteristically soft and low. No, kiddo, just bad people, and I'll chase them away. But fear crept into his own heart. A video sent by Draven through an encrypted channel. Ilara was threatened, her face contorted in tears, with the message, hand over the core, or the girl dies in Boston. His heart seized, and the memory of that night in New York returned like a ghost. Montfort Castle appeared under the shimmering silver light of the Provence moon, a grey stone fortress with sharp towers reaching for the starry sky. Green ivy rustled against its ancient walls, and the chilly night wind carried the scent of damp earth and sea salt. A low stone fence surrounded it, patrolled by Spanish mafia guards with handguns at their hips, their long shadows stretching across the white gravel path. Raven decided to go in alone. Sable and Ilara would hide in the car half a mile away with one order: wait for my signal. He scaled the wall with skills honed in the Rocky Mountains, his fingers finding purchase in the damp crevices of the stone. His muscles strained under his thin coat as the wind hissed past his ears like death's whisper. Reaching the top, he dropped into the rear courtyard as silently as a wildcat, crawling low through the dew-covered grass to avoid the cameras. The smell of wild roses mixing with gunpowder from the armory. Inside the castle, the stone corridors were dark, lit by the pale, flickering yellow of wall-mounted torches. The sound of water dripping from the vaulted ceiling echoed like a slow heartbeat. The smell of dampness and rusted metal filled his nostrils. And ancient, dust-covered portraits seemed to warp in the dim light. Raven slipped down the hallway and used jujitsu on the first guard, a chokehold from the shadows. The crack of bone swallowed by the wind whistling through a Gothic window. The body fell to the stone floor, its dark red blood quickly congealing in the French cold. A second guard patrolled from around a corner, drawing an ornately curved dagger. Its blade flashed in the torchlight. Raven dodged to the side as the blade sliced the air by his cheek, then countered with Muay Thai. An elbow strike shattered the man's jaw, sending teeth flying along with stone dust as he collapsed, writhing in agony. But the noise had alerted a third guard, who charged with a flurry of karate strikes, slashing horizontally with a bayonet fixed to his handgun. Raven blocked with his forearm, blood from the gash streaming down and soaking his sleeve red. He countered with a high taekwondo kick to the chest, slamming the man against the stone wall with a loud thud, the sharp crack of his ribs echoing down the hall. Model. He plunged into the cellar, an entrance hidden behind a marble statue where faint moans echoed up from the darkness. The torture chamber was pitch black, dangling with chains and reeking of dried blood and terrified sweat. A middle-aged man was bound to an iron chair, his face a mess of bruises and burn scars, his brown eyes clouded beneath a shock of tangled grey hair. It was a former CIA agent named Marcus Hale, the man who had trained Raven during the Cold War. "Raven, 9?" Marcus rasped, his voice raw with pain. Raven cut the chains with his dagger and helped him up. "Who did this? Kyle?" Marcus nodded weakly, blood dripping from a wound in his side. "Draven tortured me because I knew too much. He's using this castle to store the virus, the last container before it's moved to Spain." "But..." "Ilara." He pointed to a nearby computer monitor, where a video played on a loop. "Ilara, held captive in Boston." A soldier pressing a gun to the little girl's head. A threat echoing, "Hand over the core, or it's over." Raven's heart felt like it was being crushed. A visceral fear surged within him, not the fear of death, but the fear of losing Ilara, the only thing keeping him from total darkness. He slammed his fist into the stone wall, blood from his knuckles seeping into the cracks. His breath came in ragged gasps in the freezing hallway. Marcus touched his shoulder, his voice trembling. "Stop. Is now. God teaches us to forgive our enemies, but never to forget protecting the weak, just as he protects the children." Raven looked up. His eyes are rare, burning red. "Forgive? After what Draven did to you? To Ilara?" Marcus managed a weak smile. "Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the strength not to become the monster." The words echoed like a prayer in that stone hell. Suddenly, the heavy thud of footsteps echoed from the corridor. Kyle's team had found them. Rifles unleashed a storm of bullets, splintering the ancient wooden door with small explosions. Raven pulled Marcus behind a weapons crate. Firing back with his handgun, 2 shots to the lead man's chest sent a spray of crimson blood across the flickering torchlight. The second man charged in for close combat, landing a powerful boxing hook on Raven's shoulder, a searing pain, like fire on an old wound, shot through him. He staggered, but used an Aikido throw to slam the man onto the slick stone floor. Locking him in an armbar, choke the sickening crack of bone mingled with a scream. Sable suddenly appeared from a side passage, taking down 2 men from a distance with her sniper rifle, the shots echoing through the cellar as they hit their heads. "The car's waiting. Ilara called Draven knows we're here." They ran to the courtyard as the Provence wind howled through the cliffs. Raven lifted Marcus into the car, his body feeling as light as a dried leaf. Kale's men pursued them in a jeep, bullets whizzing past the windshield, a shard of glass embedding itself in Sable's cheek. Raven swerved the car abruptly, crashing through the brush on the hillside. The jeep slammed into an ancient olive tree, exploding in a fireball that lit up the night. They had a temporary escape. They stopped by the shore of the Mediterranean, glittering under the moon as the waves lapped gently like a soft lullaby. Ilara hugged Raven tightly, sobbing, "I was so scared that you'd be gone forever." He stroked his sister's hair, his heart aching. "I'll never leave you." But from the back seat, Marcus whispered, "Go to Spain. Kale's meeting in Costa Brava. Destroy it all." Raven stared out at the Black Sea, the wind carrying the faint scent of a fragile freedom. Marcus's advice tore at him, forgiveness or protection. With Draven's grip tightening, the castle in Provence was just the middle chapter of a nightmare, and Ilara was the flame that kept him alive. The group moved toward the coast of Costa Brava and Spain, where Kyle was holding a major transaction meeting. Under the moonlight, Raven led an assault filled with gunfights and struggles on sheer cliffs. The sea wind howling in his ears. Sable sacrificed a piece of her past, revealing she had once been a victim of the cartel. But Kyle escaped, leaving behind a time bomb that nearly sent the entire team to the bottom of the sea. Raven wondered, would revenge ever bring peace? Or was it just an endless cycle? The Mediterranean wind whistled through the window cracks of the SUV, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed mixed with the cool night mist of Provence. Raven Lock sped down the cliffside road of Costa Brava, tires screeching on the cracked, winding asphalt. The silver moonlight reflecting off the dark waves below. In the passenger seat, Sable Noir checked an encrypted map on her phone, her face pale in the screen's blue glow, the wound from Montfort Castle still seeping blood through her bandage. In the back, Ilara sat silently, holding on to Marcus Hale, the former agent now as frail as an autumn leaf, his ragged breaths mingling with the distant roar of the waves. Costa Brava. Kale Vossar is meeting with the Spanish mafia at a seaside villa, Sable whispered, her voice hoarse from the pain in her shoulder. They're trading the final virus container. It's being moved by submarine to Washington. If we don't stop it, Draven will trigger a pandemic. Raven nodded, his hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Marcus's words from the castle cellar haunting him. Forgiveness isn't weakness. But with Ilara beside him, forgiveness felt like a lie. He had killed his own father to protect her, and now he was ready to kill anyone to keep his promise. They parked on a sheer cliff half a mile from the villa. The sea wind whipped like a leather strap, and waves crashed violently at the bottom of the dark abyss, the strong smell of iodine filling their nostrils. Kale's villa appeared under the moonlight, a gleaming white structure with a red-tiled roof and a veranda overlooking the sea. Pale yellow neon lights illuminated a courtyard where metal crates were stacked, and the dark figures of Spanish mafia guards patrolled with rifles at the ready. Raven left Ilara and Marcus hidden in the car with a backup pistol, whispering, "Stay safe. Kid, I'll be back quick." Ilara grabbed his hand, her blue eyes flashing with fear. "Don't let them take you like they took my aunt." He stroked his sister's hair, his heart aching. Then he and Sable rappelled down the cliff face with ropes, muscles clenched, the wind whistling past his ears, drowning out the pounding of his heart as loose rocks skittered beneath their boots. At the bottom of the cliff was a white pebble beach, where the waves licked at their feet like an invitation from death itself. They approached the villa from the sea, crawling low over the damp sand and using thorny olive bushes to avoid the cameras. Raven led the assault, taking out the first guard on the cliff's edge with jujitsu, a chokehold from the shadows. The snap of bone lost in the crash of the waves. The body fell to the pebbles, dark blood spreading and mixing with the white sea foam. Sable followed, drawing her mini sniper rifle and taking out a second man from a distance. The suppressed shot was a soft pop as the bullet pierced his chest. He tumbled off the cliff, his scream swallowed by the wind, but the noise gave them away. 5 guards rushed out from the courtyard, their AKs unleashing a storm of bullets that tore through the olive bushes, sending leaves flying like deadly confetti. Raven rolled behind a large boulder, returning fire with his Glock. 2 shots to the lead man's head sent a spray of crimson blood into the moonlight as his body slammed onto the pebbles. The sea wind shrieked in his ears like a maniacal laugh as he charged into close combat with the second man, a Spaniard who slashed at him with a curved karate dagger, its blade glinting in the moonlight. Raven dodged to the side, the wind from the blade tearing the skin on his cheek as warm blood trickled down. He countered with a Muay Thai move, shattering the man's jaw with an elbow strike. Teeth scattered across the white sand as the man went down, growling in pain. Sable joined in from a hidden angle, using Aikido to throw a third man onto the pebble beach. She locked him in an armbar choke, the crack of his bones echoing with the roaring waves. But a fourth man rushed her with a barrage of boxing blows. A powerful hook smashed into her shoulder, sending a jolt of agony through her old wound. She staggered back toward the cliff's edge, pebbles crumbling under her feet. "Sable!" Raven yelled, rushing to help. He delivered a high taekwondo kick to the man's chest, sending him flying into the sea. The waves swallowed his body, white foam erupting. The last man opened fire with a machine gun from the villa's veranda, bullets whizzing past Raven's ear and ripping through his leather jacket. He vaulted onto a low rock wall, unleashing a kung fu combination of punches into the Spaniard's face. His nose broke with a sickening crack, blood spraying into the salty sea air. They wrestled on the edge of the sheer stone veranda, the wind howling like a curse around them. Raven locked the man in a jiu-jitsu chokehold, breaking his arm with a dry snap before shoving him off the edge. His scream faded into the waves below. Inside the villa, the air was thick with the smell of Cuban cigars and Spanish wine. Crates of the virus were stacked in the marble-floored living room, where a large screen showed a live video conference with Draven in Washington. Kael Vossar stood in the center, his massive frame sweating in a white suit, his scarred face flashing with anger under the crystal chandelier. 9. "You dare come to my turf?" He drew a Beretta pistol and fired. The bullet zipped past Sable's ear, shattering a piece of the stone wall. Raven pushed her behind a leather sofa and charged forward. "Kael, why'd you sell your soul to Draven? Revenge for Kabul?" Kael sneered, his accent heavy. "My cousin promised me power. This virus will bring America to its knees." They lunged at each other in the middle of the room. Kael's large knife slashed horizontally, its blade flashing under the lights. Raven blocked it with his own dagger, sparks flying with a clang that echoed through the villa. The wind howled through the open window, carrying the scent of the sea. He dodged just in time, but the blade grazed his thigh, and blood began to soak the marble floor. Sable got to her feet and sniped the two remaining guards at the back door. The small pops of the shots were followed by the thud of bodies hitting a walnut table, but then she suddenly froze, her eyes red. "Stop. Kael, I was one of your cartel's victims in Mexico City. They killed my parents over a debt. Draven promised me justice, but he just used me as a tool." Her voice trembled, the sacrifice of her past bleeding out like an old wound the first time she had ever revealed it. Here, in this hell of stone and sea, Kael laughed like a madman, locking Raven in an armbar and pressing him against a glass wall that overlooked the cliff. "Justice? I times am times justice," Raven struggled, using his legs to reverse the hold, flipping their positions. Kael's arm bone snapped with a loud crack. He roared in pain, letting go and stumbling back. Sable rushed in to help, breaking his leg with a low karate kick. But Kael activated a timer on a bomb beneath the virus crates. A series of beeps echoed through the room as a red countdown appeared on the screen. 60 seconds. They ran onto the terrace. The strong sea wind knocked them down. Raven carried Sable and jumped off the cliff, a rope dangling, waves crashing thunderously below. The bomb detonated behind them, flames engulfing the villa, shrapnel flying like a deadly rain. The shockwave threw them into a freefall. Raven clung to the rope, his body slamming against the sharp rocks. Blood seeped from his thigh, staining the cliff face. But he pulled them both down to the safety of the pebble beach, the waves licking at their cold feet. Kael escaped on a speedboat, the roar of its engine fading into the night. They ran back to the car. Elara cried out, hugging them tightly. "You guys," Marcus whispered from the back seat. "He got away." "But the virus is still out there." Raven sat, leaning against the cliff, the sea wind whistling in his ears, watching the fire burn against the horizon. Would revenge bring Elara peace? Or was it just an endless cycle? Like the relentless waves? With Kyle gone, Washington was now the final target, but Draven's shadow seemed to consume everything. Returning to Washington, D.C. Raven hid in the sewer system beneath the Capitol, planning to expose Draven through the underground press. A street war erupted with CIA special agents, filled with dodging bullets and brutal fights in the pouring rain on Pennsylvania Avenue. He rescued Ilara from Draven's clutches, only to discover Kale was merely a puppet for a greater power, a corrupt senator. A moment of humanity, Raven prayed beside Ilara, seeking strength from his faith. The torrential rain lashed against the SUV's windshield, turning the coastal road of Costa Brava into a grey river in the dead of night. Raven lock slammed on the gas, rocketing through the silver sheet of water, tires skidding on the wet asphalt. The engines roared, drowning out the crashing waves from the cliffs behind them. In the passenger seat, Sable Noir clutched her shoulder, blood from the shrapnel wound seeping through her jacket, her pale face flickering in the dim glow of the headlights. In the back, Ilara sat close to Marcus Hale, his sister clinging to the old man's frail hand, her deep blue eyes staring anxiously into the darkness that swallowed the Spanish highway. Kale escaped, but the virus is still out there, Sable whispered, her voice hoarse with pain, her fingers gliding across an encrypted phone. The data from the villa revealed a final itinerary, a cargo submarine headed for Washington, D.C., where Draven was waiting to activate the pandemic. Raven gripped the steering wheel, rainwater spraying through a crack in the glass. The memory of the fiery explosion in Provence haunting him. What had avenging Kale brought but more blood? He glanced at Ilara in the rearview mirror. The 16-year-old girl was now a reflection of himself, fragile yet resilient. "We're going home," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "To Washington. To end this." But in his mind, Marcus's words echoed. Forgiveness. Or an eternity in hell? They flew through the Mediterranean night on a private jet borrowed from a French contact, landing secretly at Dulles Airport at dawn. An American autumn fog covered the runway like a grey curtain. The Washington, D.C. air was heavy with the smell of decaying leaves and exhaust fumes. The ancient capital, with its stark white Lincoln Memorial, had become a labyrinth of enemies. Draven controlled the CIA, and Kyle was just his puppet. They took refuge in the sewer system beneath the city. The entrance a dilapidated storm drain near the Potomac River. The sound of trickling rainwater mixed with the scent of damp earth and rust filled their nostrils. Raven led the group down a wet iron ladder, his flashlight beam sweeping across concrete walls marred with graffiti, the dripping water echoing like a slow heartbeat. "We're safe here for now," he said, spreading a plastic tarp for Ilara to rest on. She curled up with her teddy bear, her breathing shaky. Sable and Marcus sat leaning against a wall, a laptop screen flashing in the darkness. The plan: expose Draven through the underground press, a freelance journalist named Elena Voss near Capitol Hill, ready to publish the virus data if they had the final piece of evidence. Raven hacked into the CIA system from an old laptop, his fingers flying across the mud-caked keyboard. An image appeared on the screen, Kale meeting with the corrupt Senator Harlan Blackwood at a villa in the Washington suburbs, trading the virus activation core for political protection. "Kale is a puppet," Sable whispered, her eyes flashing with anger. "Blackwood, he's using cartels and the mafia to manipulate the election, turning the pandemic into a weapon." Raven clenched his fist, blood from the Costa Brava wound seeping through his sleeve. Draven hadn't just betrayed Shadow, he'd dragged the entire government into the mire. But then his phone buzzed a video from Draven. "Ilara. Captured again in Boston?" No. It was a trap, a fake image. But he knew Draven had eyes everywhere. "I have to save her," he growled, getting to his feet. "Elena Voss, we meet on Pennsylvania Avenue. Tonight." Sable nodded, bandaging her wound. I'm with you, but the rain's heavy, they'll be hunting. Washington's night rain poured down like a silver waterfall, turning Pennsylvania Avenue into a shimmering river under the pale yellow streetlights. The blare of car horns mixed with the chilling autumn wind. Raven and Sable moved on foot through the wet streets, their black raincoats splattered with mud, the damp smell of decaying leaves and concrete filling their nostrils. Elena Voss was waiting at a small roadside cafe, her messy red hair sheltered by an umbrella, her sharp brown eyes scanning the surroundings. The data, Raven handed her the USB drive, whispering, "Bioweapon, Draven and Blackwood. Publish it now." But suddenly, the glass window shattered from a volley of suppressed gunfire. A CIA special ops team stormed out of black vans, 8 men in gleaming black rain gear. M4 rifles leveled in the downpour, their faces hidden by masks. A street war erupted in the rain. Bullets ripped through the cafe's red brick wall, sending shards of glass flying with the rainwater. Raven shoved Elena behind the drenched wooden counter and returned fire with his Glock 2 shots to the first man's chest. Blood sprayed, mixing with the rain as it streamed down the cobblestone sidewalk. The second agent rushed in for close combat, executing a karate chop with a bayonet in the whipping rain. The blade glinting under the neon lights, Raven dodged aside, the rain-soaked clothes chilling his skin. Then countered with jiu-jitsu, locking the man in a chokehold from behind and snapping his neck with a crack that mingled with the rolling thunder. The body fell into a bloody puddle, ripples spreading like ink. From a street corner, Sable took out the third man with a single rifle, shot the silenced crack of the bullet piercing his skull. He collapsed against a parked car, its windshield shattering in the rain, but they were outnumbered. Machine gun fire erupted from the black van, bullets whizzing past Raven's ear, tearing a lamppost apart with a crackle of sparks and rain. He rolled across the slippery pavement, dodging the hailstorm of bullets, then launched himself at the fourth agent with Muay Thai. A low kick shattered the man's kneecap with a sickening crunch. The agent collapsed, growling in pain. They wrestled in a puddle of water. A boxing hook from the agent slammed into Raven's chest, the pain spreading like a hammer blow. Rainwater mixed with blood dripped from his mouth. Raven countered with a high taekwondo kick to the jaw, sending teeth flying in a spray of red foam. He then used Aikido to throw the man towards a storm drain, locking him in an armbar until he passed out. Sable rushed through the rain to help, using a karate chop to disarm the fifth agent, his knife clattering on the wet cobblestones. But the sixth agent caught her with a hook to the shoulder. She staggered, falling into a puddle, her gun slipping from her grasp and carried away by the current. Raven screamed, lunging forward and unleashing a volley of kung fu punches into the man's face. His nose broke with a crack, blood erupting and mixing with the rain to form a red stream flowing into the sewer. The last man, the team leader, a tall brute named Reyes. X-Shadow opened fire from the van. Give up the core. 9. Draven. Hazalara. Raven zigzagged between parked cars, water splashing at his feet, then leaped onto the hood of the black van. He stabbed his dagger through the windshield and dragged Reyes out. They wrestled on the rain-slicked street, trading furious blows. Reyes used his boxing skills to split Raven's lip, the salty taste of blood mixing with rain, but Raven locked him in an armbar, forcing him down into a puddle. Where is Elara? Reyes just smirked, coughing up water. Blackwood. He's the boss. Kael is just a puppet. Sable rushed over and put Reyes down with a bullet to the chest, his blood spreading wide in the rain. They dragged Elena into a dark alley, the rain lashing their faces like a whip. A CIA vehicle pursued, its glaring headlights tearing through the darkness. Raven hot-wired a car, spun it around, and rammed it into the tail of the black van. Metal screeched on metal. The CIA vehicle flipped and exploded in a red fireball against the rain. They had escaped for now. Back in the sewer, Elara was waiting with Marcus. You're covered in blood. Raven knelt beside his sister, rainwater dripping from his hair, and held her tight in the damp darkness. I'm okay. We're going to win. He closed his eyes and whispered a prayer for the first time in years. God, give me strength. Protect this girl, as you protect the weak. His voice trembled, his faith as fragile as a candle in the wind, but it warmed his cold heart. Sable nodded, her eyes red. Elena published it. Blackwood is exposed. But Draven knew the war was now against a much greater power, and this rain-soaked Washington was just the beginning of a hellish, fiery climax. At the underground CIA headquarters in Washington, Raven confronted KL in a final battle, a knife and hand-to-hand fight amidst the flashing red lights of the server room. Sable provided support remotely, hacking the system to broadcast the evidence globally. But Draven sacrificed himself to protect KL, revealing a personal motive rooted in a past war. The team achieved a temporary victory, but the shadowy powers promised revenge, leaving Raven with deep emotional scars. The Washington rain still pattered on the manhole cover, a drumbeat heralding the final storm. Raven Locke led his team out of the capital's dark sewer system. The trickle of sewage mixed with the scent of damp earth and rust, and his flashlight beam illuminated the way up to the CIA headquarters, a massive concrete block hidden underground near the White House, where Draven Grimshaw held control from a deep server room. Beside him, Sable Noir clutched her encrypted laptop, her face pale in the dim streetlight, the wound from Costa Brava bleeding through her raincoat. Elara stayed close to Raven, his sister trembling as she supported Marcus Hale. The old man was barely breathing now, his hand shaking as he pointed to a map. Side door. Code 729. Draven's on the lower level. With Kale, Elena Voss had published the data. The news was spreading through the dark web, but Blackwood's forces covered it up in an instant, calling it fake news. Raven clenched his fist, blood seeping from the wound he'd gotten on Pennsylvania Avenue. It ends tonight. I don't want Elara to see this. But the girl took his hand, her voice trembling. I want to be with you, like God is with the lost. Her words haunted him, a reminder of his prayer in the sewer that fragile faith was now the flame keeping him from the darkness. They breached the side entrance in a torrential downpour, the keypad beeping as it opened onto a grey concrete corridor where neon lights flickered, casting a blood-red glow. The air was thick with the smell of hot machinery and ozone. A distant alarm wailed as CIA operatives stormed from the elevator, 10 figures in gleaming black tack gear, MP5s raised, their faces hidden by helmets and masks. Raven shoved Elara and Marcus behind a server rack and returned fire with his Glock, 2 shots to the lead man's chest. Crimson blood sprayed across the stained concrete wall as the body slammed onto the metal floor. The second man lunged into close combat, slashing with a rifle-mounted bayonet in a karate chop under the red neon, the blade glinting in the flashing light. Raven dodged, the wind from the blade tearing the skin on his cheek as warm blood mixed with sweat. He countered with jujitsu, locking him in a rear chokehold and snapping his neck with a crack that echoed through the hall. The body fell, scraping against a steel door. Sable joined the fight from the shadows, taking down the third operative with a silenced shot from her compact rifle. The round pierced his skull with a soft pop, and he tumbled down an escalator, staining the metal steps with blood. But there were too many operatives. They opened up with submachine guns from both flanks. Bullets whizzed past Raven's ear, tearing into servers with a crackle of sparks and billowing black smoke. He rolled behind a control console to evade the hailstorm of fire, then launched himself at the fourth man with Muay Thai. A low kick shattering his knee with a crunch that vibrated through the floor. The man collapsed, growling in pain. They grappled amidst a tangle of cables. A boxing hook from the operative slammed into Raven's shoulder, sending a hammer blow of pain through an old wound. Dark red blood dripped from his mouth. Raven countered with a high taekwondo kick to the jaw, sending teeth flying with metallic dust. Then used Aikido to throw him to the ground, finishing him with an armbar choke. The man's frantic gasps mixed with the wail of the alarm before his eyes rolled back and he passed out. The fifth man rushed Sable with a barrage of boxing strikes. A hook split her lip, blood mixing with sweat as she staggered back against a hot server wall. "Sable!" Raven yelled, charging through the hail of bullets and unleashing a flurry of kung fu strikes into the man's face. His nose broke with a sickening crack, spraying blood across a flickering monitor. Sable recovered, disabling his arm with a karate chop that sent his knife clattering to the floor before locking him in a rear armbar. They ran for the lower level, Elara and Marcus close behind. The elevator groaned, descending into hell, a massive server room where hundreds of racks blinked with red lights like the heartbeat of some monstrous beast. The air was scorching hot, thick with the acrid smell of burning circuits and ozone. Kael Vossar was waiting for them in the center of the room, his massive frame stuffed into a suit torn from his battle in Costa Brava, his scarred face contorted with rage under the red lights. In his hand, he held the virus activation core, a gleaming, encrypted metal device. Beside him stood Draven Grimshaw, his former mentor, now a twisted shadow of the man he once was. His once warm brown eyes were now as cold as steel, a pistol held steady in his hand. "9, you've come to hell," Kael roared, his voice thick with a Mexican accent, as he charged with a large machete, slashing horizontally. The blade glinted red in the flashing lights. Raven dodged just in time, the wind from the blade tearing his shirt and reopening an old wound. He countered barehanded, a Muay Thai elbow smashing into Kael's jaw with a crack that echoed off the servers. Kael staggered back, snarling. They grappled amidst a tangle of cables. Kael's karate chop grazed Raven's arm, and dark red blood dripped onto the vibrating metal floor. But he locked Kael in a jiu-jitsu chokehold, pressing him against a searing hot server. "You're Blackwood's puppet. What does Draven want with you?" Sable lunged for a secondary console, her fingers flying across the keyboard as the main screen flickered. "Broadcasting. Globally. The proof of the virus. Draven. Blackwood. All of it." A series of beeps echoed as the data streamed out. News of the fabricated pandemic exploded online, exposing Senator Blackwood. Kael struggled, landing a boxing hook to Raven's chest. The pain was like fire, and he staggered. But he used a low taekwondo kick to shatter Kael's knee. The bone snapped, and Kael collapsed. The knife clattered away. They went hand to hand. A kung fu combination from Raven broke Kael's jaw, spraying crimson blood onto a server as he screamed, "Blackwood will hunt you down." But Draven emerged from the shadows, pressing his pistol to Raven's back. "Stop. 9. I made you what you are." He fired. The bullet grazed Raven's shoulder, hot blood spraying from the wound. But a shot rang out from a distance. Sable. The round pierced Draven's chest, and he collapsed next to Kael, his blood pooling on the red floor. Before he died, Draven whispered, his eyes clouding over, "Kabul. America left me behind. The virus. It was revenge for the war. Forgive, as God teaches." The words were like a knife to the heart. Raven knelt, his trembling hand reaching for his old mentor's shoulder. "Why? Why you?" But Kael took the opportunity, lunging and plunging a knife into Raven's side. The cold steel pierced his flesh, and blood gushed from the wound. He roared in pain, using an armbar to flip Cale, snapping his arm with a crack before landing a final punch to his temple. Cale crumpled, unconscious in the growing pool of blood. The alarms shrieked as the doors to the room burst open. Blackwood's operatives stormed in, but Sable triggered a system lockdown. The global broadcast flashing on every screen: CIA treason, biological weapon. They escaped up a fire escape, Ilara pulling Marcus along as gunfire echoed behind them. The team had a temporary victory. Cale was captured. Draven was dead, but a final screen displayed a message from Blackwood. The game isn't over. Locke. The shadow government will hunt you. As Raven carried Ilara through the streets, blood from his side seeping into his sister's shirt. The wound in his soul was far deeper than the one in his flesh. Draven Godfather or monster. His words were a torment, forgiveness, but also revenge, with Blackwood still in the shadows. The rain-soaked dawn in Washington was a false one, and the darkness promised a new kind of hell. After their victory, Raven took Ilara to a quiet farm in upstate New York, but the shadow government sent one last assassin to attack in the misty dawn. A tragic battle unfolded in a wheat field, with Raven using every skill he had to protect his family, ending with a stunning twist. Sable returned from the dead. The story ends on an open note, with Raven accepting a new mission to fight the darkness in Washington. Echoing themes of eternal justice and God's word, the light will shine in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Weak morning sunlight filtered through the thick fog of upstate New York, casting a golden hue over the ripe wheat fields that rolled like a peaceful ocean. Ilara's aunt's old farmhouse came into view in the morning light. A white wooden house with a white picket fence lined with wild roses. The scent of fresh grass and damp earth filled the crisp autumn air. Raven Locke stopped the old pickup truck before the gate. The engine sputtered and died. His hands, gripping the steering wheel, were bone white. The wound from the CIA headquarters in Washington was still bleeding through the crude bandage. In the passenger seat, Ilara was fast asleep, her 16-year-old face now as peaceful as an angel's, an old teddy bear clutched in her thin arms. In the back, Marcus Hale lay still on the bench seat. His breathing had stopped the night before the old man had passed peacefully after whispering, "Justice, not vengeance." Son, Sable Noir. She had vanished in the chaos of the escape from the headquarters. Her wounds were so severe, Raven thought she hadn't made it. He carried Ilara into the house, his steps heavy on the white gravel path. The autumn wind, carrying the faint smell of decaying leaves, like a whisper from the past. Ilara's Aunt Maria, a middle-aged Mexican woman with a face full of warm wrinkles, rushed out of the kitchen door, throwing her arms around the girl. "Child, my God, you're safe." The smell of baking bread and roasted coffee filled the warm wooden kitchen, and sunlight streamed through the frosted glass windows, illuminating a dining table covered with a checkered cloth. Raven sank into an old wicker chair, his body aching as if it had been crushed, his eyes staring blankly out at the golden wheat field, shrouded in fog. The news from Elena Voss had spread. Draven was dead. Cale Vossar was captured, and Senator Blackwood had resigned amidst the bioweapons scandal. But he knew the shadow government wouldn't die so easily. Blackwood's final message echoed in his mind. The game isn't over. Ilara woke up and sat beside her brother, taking his hand. "Brother, we won. Right? Like God promised. The light will overcome the darkness." Raven managed a weak smile and stroked his sister's hair, a rare warmth filling his heart amid the hell he'd been through. "Yeah, kid, but I'm not going to let the darkness come back." He prayed silently at the table, for the first time not for survival, but for peace. "Thank you, Lord, for Ilara, The morning fog began to burn off as brilliant golden sunlight illuminated the wheat field, the stalks swaying like a gentle lullaby. Raven went outside to breathe, his boots sinking into the soft earth. The chilly autumn wind whipped against his face, carrying the scent of fresh grass and a fragile freedom. He sat on the rotting wooden fence, a pistol hidden in his worn leather jacket. His eyes scanning the horizon, the habits of Shadow 9 died hard. Elara ran after him, laughing and picking stalks of wheat, her brown hair flying in the wind. "Look, brother, it's like golden snow!" Raven's heart ached this single human moment. After so much bloodshed from New York to Washington, was his only reward. But suddenly, the distant roar of truck engines echoed through the remaining fog. 3 gleaming black SUVs sped down the dirt road, kicking up a cloud of dust, their bright headlights cutting through the dawn. Blackwood's shadow network, the last of the assassins. Not CIA, but leftover mercenaries from the Mexican cartel, sent to eliminate the living evidence. The vehicles screeched to a halt in front of the farmhouse gate. 6 assassins leaped out, burly figures in black leather, AK rifles at the ready, their faces hidden by baseball caps, their eyes bloodshot in the morning sun. The first one opened fire on the wooden fence, sending splinters and dirt flying. The sound of the blasts thundered across the field like lightning. Raven shoved Elara towards the house, yelling, "Run, Maria. Get her out of here." The woman rushed into the kitchen, pulling Elara through the back door. But bullets tore through the wood, shattering the glass in the sunlight. Raven drew his Glock and returned fire from behind the fence. 2 shots to the lead man's chest. Crimson blood sprayed onto the golden wheat as his body slammed into the soft earth. The second man charged through the field for close combat, slashing horizontally with a curved karambit knife that glinted in the bright sun. Raven dodged, the wind from the blade tearing the skin on his cheek as warm blood mixed with sweat. He countered with jiu-jitsu, locking the man in a rear chokehold and snapping his neck with a crack that was lost in the autumn wind. The body sank deep into the wheat, as if it had been swallowed whole. A tragic battle erupted in the wheat field. The wind whipped violently, sending stalks of wheat flying like golden rain, the morning sun illuminating the whizzing bullets. The third man unleashed his machine gun from an SUV, the bullets tearing through the wooden fence with a crackle, splinters mixing with wheat leaves. Raven rolled through the field, dodging the storm of bullets, the wheat falling at his feet like crashing waves. Then lunged at the fourth man with Muay Thai. A low kick shattered his knee, the bone cracking against the soft earth as the man collapsed with a snarl. They grappled among the chest-high wheat, a boxing hook from the assassin catching Raven's shoulder, a searing pain like fire spreading through his Washington wound, blood dripping from his mouth and soaking into the dark earth. Raven countered with a high taekwondo kick to the jaw, sending teeth flying with golden wheat. Then used Aikido to slam him to the ground and lock him in an armbar, his ragged breaths mixed with the wind as the man's eyes rolled back. Unconscious in the field, the fifth man charged from behind. Throwing a barrage of boxing punches, a powerful hook hit Raven in the back, sending him staggering into the wheat, the stalk scraping painfully against his skin. His gun slipped from his hand, so he drew the dagger from his calf sheath and lunged into close combat. Steel clashed against steel, the clang echoing in the dawn as sparks reflected the sunlight. The assassin slashed at his stomach. Raven dodged just in time, but the blade grazed his thigh, blood flowing freely and staining the wheat red. He countered with kung fu, a flurry of punches to the man's face, breaking his nose with a crack, the blood spraying into the salty autumn wind. They wrestled on the soft ground, the wheat trampled around them like a circle of hell, before Raven locked in a final armbar, snapping the man's arm with a dry crack as he stopped breathing amidst the golden stalks. The last man, the team's commander, a massive Mexican named Rico, Kale's former henchman, rushed forward, pressing a pistol to Ilara's head from the back of the house as Maria knelt. Begging, "Stop! The girl is innocent." Raven moved through the field like a ghost, the wheat whipping painfully against his face. Using every last bit of his skill, he leaped from a patch of wheat, using a karate chop to strike Rico's hand. The gun clattering on the gravel, he engaged in close combat on the porch, the autumn wind whistling in his ear as Rico used jiu-jitsu to choke him, pressing him against the warm wooden wall. "Blackwood sends his regards. You die for Draven," Raven struggled, using his legs to reverse the hold. The sound of breaking bone mixed with Ilara's sobs. Then a Muay Thai hook shattered Rico's jaw, sending blood spraying in the morning sun. He locked Rico in an armbar, forcing him into unconsciousness. This ends for Ilara. But unexpectedly a gunshot rang out from the wheat along the road. A single shot taking Rico down from a distance. Gunpowder smoke drifting on the smell of fresh grass. Sable Noir emerged from the mist, her black hair a mess in the sunlight. A crude bandage on her wound. A tired smile flashing in her green eyes. "I'm hard to kill." 9. Elena's ambulance got me back. She rushed to hug Ilara, and the group gathered on the wooden porch, the dawn light illuminating their exhausted but hopeful faces. Raven knelt, holding his sister tight, tears finally streaming down his face after so many years. "We're free." But his phone buzzed an anonymous message from the Blackwood entity. Blackwood escaped. The game continues in Washington. Raven stood, gun in hand, and looked out at the dissipating fog on the horizon. A new mission was beginning to fight the darkness in the capital. Not alone, but with Sable, Ilara, and a fragile faith. God's words echoed on the autumn wind. The light will overcome the darkness. Like a promise of eternal justice in the midst of an endless cycle of bloodshed, Raven smiled at his sister and stepped into the dawn, but hell, perhaps, was just beginning.